We're here with Dr. Matthew Corrigan in Jacksonville, Florida, author of American Royalty, The Bush and Clinton Families and the Danger to the American Presidency. So why is the Bush-Clinton dominance of the presidency a danger to American democracy?
Well, it really goes back to the founding of the country. If you look at some of the documents from our founding, especially the debates during the Constitution and whether the Constitution was going to be ratified or adopted, you really had a strong current of two things going on. One, the country needed a strong executive after the failures of the Articles of Confederation, and then two, also wanted to make sure we did not return to a monarchy like we had broken away from in England. So you had those two currents really colliding. And so a lot of the founders of the Constitution wanted to make sure that the executive did not become so powerful that we'd establish another monarchy. Now, there are some exceptions to this. You know, the Adams family obviously didn't have a problem with family power, but George Washington himself made sure that we would not have a royalty, we would not have a king. And George Mason, a delegate from Virginia, argued against this idea of the Constitution itself because he said even though we would be electing people, we would be in danger of an elective monarchy. In other words, people's name recognition, well-known people would get elected over and over. And if you're in the same family, those advantages really helped you to do that. So the idea from the book really came from that original debate. And then if you sort of fast forward over 200 years later, we have, you know, a lot of families who have tremendous political power in the United States. The Kennedys, the Bushes, the Clintons, the Cuomos, and the Bushes, of course. And if you look at all of these particular families, it seems like the end result is a run for the presidency. And the book argues that, you know, family politics in the United States is probably going to continue until the end of the Republic. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, you know, brothers running for the U.S. Senate or city councilmen or whatever. But for the presidency to really be shared in one immediate family, I think there's some problems with that. I think there's some constitutional problems with it, and I think it really violates the spirit of the founding of the country. And so that's where the impetus of the book came from.
Do you think that personal issues have played more of a role in legislation and the democratic process when families have played a large role in being president or had high positions in the government?
I mean, absolutely. I think when you have immediate families, again, in these positions of power, personalities are going to be a huge role. You know, I think historians are going to have, you know, book upon book about how George W. Bush was trying to react or maybe be different from his own father, George H.W. Bush. You know, and I think when you look at Bill and Senator Clinton, there's all sorts of interactions there. I mean, one of the reasons they became so famous and so well known was their family problems. They emerged on the scene really talking about problems in their marriage. And in some ways, the problems in their marriage dominated President Clinton's 2 terms. So personal issues are huge when you talk about presidential decision making. And so when you share the presidency in immediate families, it really brings in a lot of personal baggage that the country probably doesn't need. And if you go back and look at the history of a lot of our presidents, even though they may not have shared presidents among immediate families, or presidencies among immediate families, except the Adams family, again, family issues are huge in a lot of their decision making and a lot of their issues. So if you bring family issues and sort of multiply it with the fact that a son is trying to follow a father or a wife is trying to follow a husband, it really does, I think, corrupt the democratic process.
Do you think there are any particular factors in the political climate over the past or in the recent history that have led to these families having such dominance in the government?
Sure. I think our current politics really lend itself to family power, because the number one characteristic that you really need to be successful is fundraising. Now, fundraising can't do it all for you. You can raise a lot of money and still lose elections, but you generally cannot win presidential elections or a Senate election without a lot of money. And if you have name recognition, that is a huge advantage in raising money. So fundraising lets people really get into the game. And then secondly, name recognition. If you go to a ballot box and you're familiar with a name, again, that's a huge advantage, and a really an unfair advantage to other people who don't have the name recognition. So I think that's important as well. And then the third factor is our media culture now, where we really focus on personalities and celebrities and sort of this culture of wanting to know what's going on in families. Well, if you want to know what's going on in families, then those people are going to become well known. And again, if they decide to enter the political process, they have a lot of advantages.
Do you think the U.S. government should take any official steps to prevent this from happening in the future?
I think a constitutional amendment banning presidencies and immediate families is not a bad idea. I don't think it will ever happen, but I don't think it's a bad idea. But I think voters need to think about it. I think that's where any particular reform needs to come from, the voters themselves. And to really think about, when you talk about the most powerful political office in the world, do you want it shared in an immediate family? Do we want to look at Governor Jeb Bush 8 years from now, or Senator Clinton running maybe 8 years from now, which is a distinct possibility. Senator Clinton becoming Secretary of State, I think, makes that much more likely. And again, you can be very skilled people. They're both very skilled people, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be president. And I think Senator Obama, with his unique background and sort of coming out of nowhere, if you will, shows that there's plenty of people in this country who are really qualified to be president. We don't have to go back to these families all the time.
This was Dr. Matthew Corrigan, author of American Royalty, The Bush and Clinton Families and the Danger to the American Presidency. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.